Den of Thieves by James B. Stewart. Picture yourself squeezed into a cramped airport phone booth on May 12, 1986. You're Martin Siegel, one of Wall Street's golden boys. At just 38, you're pulling in millions, turning heads with your looks, and living what most people would call the dream life. You've just wrapped up a client meeting and dial your New York office for a quick check-in. Then your secretary gasps. The stock ticker in your office has erupted with urgent bells, the kind that signal earth-shattering news. Her voice trembles as she reads, SEC charges Drexel Burnham Lambert official with insider trading. Your perfect world tilts on its axis. Your heart pounds like it's trying to escape your chest. In an instant, you see it all slipping away. The helicopter rides, the Connecticut beach house, those glowing profiles in Fortune magazine. It feels like someone's aimed a gun straight at your head and pulled the trigger. But then something unexpected happens. Oh my God, your secretary shouts. It's Dennis Levine, he's been arrested! The relief that washes over you is almost euphoric. The bullet missed. It hit Dennis, that pudgy, try-hard guy from the office next door. You're drenched in sweat, convinced you've just dodged the luckiest bullet of your life. But here's what you don't know yet, what nobody on Wall Street realizes on that spring day. This isn't a stray bullet, it's the opening shot of a war. That single bullet is about to ricochet through the marble halls of power, taking down giants one after another. First, Dennis Levine's career, then the legendary Ivan Boesky, and finally, the most powerful man in American finance, the undisputed king of Wall Street himself, Michael Milken. Today we're diving into James B. Stewart's masterpiece of financial journalism, Den of Thieves. This isn't some dry textbook about spreadsheets and stock prices. It's the definitive account of the greatest criminal conspiracy the financial world has ever witnessed. We're talking breathtaking ambition, mind-boggling wealth, and the seductive corruption of absolute power. By the time we're done today, you'll understand not just what these men did, but why they couldn't stop themselves. You'll see how a few seemingly harmless compromises and innocent-looking secrets can drag even the most successful people into their own destruction. Yes, this is a story about a den of thieves, but it's also a timeless warning about the temptations lurking in every corner of success, and that quiet internal war between ambition and integrity that we all face. Our story explodes in the roaring 1980s, when Wall Street felt like the absolute center of the universe. Picture unprecedented wealth, hostile corporate takeovers, and swaggering raiders. Young guys in their 20s and 30s were becoming obscenely, impossibly rich. At the heart of this frenzy stand four men, each consumed by a ferocious hunger to conquer this world. First up, Martin Siegel. Back in the 1970s, he was the golden boy at Kidder, Peabody & Company, one of those old-school, respectable Wall Street firms. Handsome, Harvard Business School pedigree, and a workaholic. Siegel practically invented the art of takeover defense, teaching corporate America how to fight off hostile raiders. By the early 80s, he seemed to have it all. Beautiful wife, mansion on the Connecticut shore, the respect of everyone who mattered. But underneath that polished exterior, Siegel was deeply insecure. He watched bigger powerhouses like Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs land the truly massive deals, and he felt Kidder, Peabody slipping into second-tier status. He felt himself being quietly pushed out of the exclusive club of Wall Street's true power players. Then there's Dennis Levine. If Siegel was the golden boy, Levine was the scrappy hustler from Queens who'd scraped through City College. Overweight, overeager, obsessed with the Wall Street glamour he'd devoured in books. Every major investment bank rejected him fresh out of college, a snub he never forgot, and blamed entirely on his lack of an Ivy League pedigree. But Levine was nothing if not persistent. He clawed his way into Citibank, where he met Robert Wilkus, a sophisticated banker who seemed to have the world figured out. Levine saw the entire system as rigged for insiders, and he was determined to force his way in. He once confessed his fantasy to Wilkus, the euphoria, the omnipotence of reading on September 12th, The Wall Street Journal of September 13th. He genuinely believed everyone was cheating to get ahead, so why shouldn't he? So Levine started building his own secret network. He recruited Wilkes first, exploiting his loneliness and disillusionment. "You could get rich. Get out of Wall Street," Levine whispered. "You could go to Nepal, become a Buddhist monk. Isn't that what you really want?" He laid out how to set up a secret Swiss bank account, making it all sound foolproof and easy. Despite his fears, Wilkes took the bait and opened an account in the Bahamas under a fake name. Levine's web kept growing. He pulled in Ilan Reich, a young lawyer at a top firm, preying on his insecurities. Then Ira Sokolow from Lehman Brothers, who worshipped him. Sokolow even recruited someone inside the mighty Goldman Sachs. Levine became the spider at the center of this web, collecting confidential merger information from his sources and trading on it through his secret Bahamian account at Bank Lou. His profits exploded into the millions. He was finally living his fantasy, Park Avenue apartment Ferrari, growing art collection. While Levine was assembling his little crime ring, two much bigger players were reshaping the entire landscape of Wall Street. Out in Beverly Hills, far from New York's traditional power centers, Michael Milken was building an empire. Working from a massive X-shaped trading desk at Drexel Burnham Lambert, Milken had practically invented the market for junk bonds, high-interest, high-risk loans to companies that couldn't get traditional financing. Milken's genius was recognizing that a diversified portfolio of these bonds could deliver incredible returns that far outweighed the risks. He built a devoted network of buyers, insurance companies, savings and loans, and a new breed of aggressive corporate raiders. By the mid-'80s, Milken controlled this market so completely that he basically was the market. If a company needed to raise $1 billion overnight for a hostile takeover, there was exactly one person in the world who could guarantee that money: Mike Milken. He was quiet, wore a toupee, worked punishing hours starting at 4:30 in the morning. He rarely socialized and seemed to live exclusively for his work. But his power was unprecedented. His followers at Drexel called him the Shep, short for shepherd, and they were fiercely loyal, grinding insane hours for the promise of becoming fabulously wealthy. In 1986 alone, Milken paid himself a staggering $550 million. The fourth player in our drama was Ivan Boesky. Boesky was an arbitrager, or ARB, a special breed of trader who bets on takeover outcomes. He was a Wall Street legend, famous for his uncanny ability to be in the right stock at the right time and for the massive size of his bets. He was also deeply weird. Same black three-piece suit every single day, followed everywhere by armed bodyguards, living on a sprawling 200-acre estate modeled after Jefferson's Monticello. Boesky was driven, obsessive, and terrified of failure. He'd nearly been wiped out several times, most notably in a deal for Cities Service Oil Company, where a sudden collapse cost him millions and brought him to the edge of ruin. He was saved only by another trader, John Mulheron. That near-death experience left Boesky with a bone-deep fear of risk and an insatiable hunger for a sure thing, an illegal edge. He desperately craved inside information. The stage was set. These four men, each on his own trajectory of ambition, were about to collide, creating a vortex of greed and crime that would eventually consume them all. The first connection formed between the Golden Boy and the legendary ARB. Martin Siegel, despite his success, felt his star fading. He needed an edge, needed to know what the arbitrageurs were thinking. Boesky needed a reliable source of confidential information from a top investment banker. In the summer of 1982, Boesky invited Siegel for drinks at the Harvard Club in New York. In the club's murky, wood-paneled grill room, Boesky made his pitch. He'd pay for information, for consulting. He knew Siegel was feeling financial pressure from his expensive new lifestyle. Siegel understood exactly what Boesky was really asking for: inside information. Though he was crossing a serious line, he rationalized it. His advice was valuable, and Boesky could help him by buying his clients' stocks, putting pressure on companies, and helping his deals succeed. It seemed like a win-win partnership. Their first illegal deal involved the takeover battle for Martin Marietta. Siegel, representing the company, tipped Boesky that they were preparing a counterattack against their aggressor Bendix. Boesky bought Bendix stock, helping create market perception that Siegel's threat was credible. It worked beautifully. The deal was a massive success for Siegel, and Boesky made a small but risk-free profit. Their system was born. Siegel would tip Boesky about upcoming Kidder, Peabody deals, acquisitions like Natomas Company and Getty Oil. Boesky would trade on the information, making millions. At year's end, they'd settle up. The payments came in cash, delivered by a mysterious courier in briefcases at the Plaza Hotel lobby. The first time Siegel opened that briefcase and saw stacks of $100 bills, he didn't feel excited. He felt sick to his stomach. He was leading a double life, and the fear of exposure was constant. Meanwhile, Dennis Levine, now a rising star at Drexel Burnham Lambert, was making his own play for the great Ivan Boesky. Having joined Drexel, Levine was now orbiting Michael Milken's junk bond money machine and involved in major takeover deals. He saw Boesky as his ticket to the next level of power and wealth. During Drexel's financing of Coastal Corporation's bid for American Natural Resources, Levine started calling Boesky, feeding him confidential details about the bid's timing and price. Boesky was amazed at how easily Levine handed over the information. Unlike Siegel, who demanded cash up front, Levine initially asked for nothing, desperate to make a good impression. Of course, Boesky traded heavily on the tips, and his profits soared. Eventually, Levine demanded his cut. They negotiated a formula: 5% of Boesky's profits if Levine's tip was the initial source, 1% if Boesky already had a position in the stock. Levine had his own source of illegal profits, but he also had another angle. He could use his relationship with Boesky to advance his career at Drexel. He was now a player, someone who could deliver the most powerful arb on Wall Street. But both these secret partnerships, Siegel-Boesky and Levine-Boesky, were small potatoes compared to the third and most dangerous alliance. This one was forged in Beverly Hills, between Ivan Boesky and the king himself, Michael Milken. After his near ruin in the city service deal, Boesky desperately needed more capital. He approached Milken and Drexel, who arranged massive financing by selling hundreds of millions in junk bonds. This deal gave Milken enormous leverage over Boesky. But their relationship went way beyond legitimate financing. It descended into mutual corruption that formed the beating heart of the entire criminal conspiracy. They engaged in parking stocks. If Boesky needed to hide his ownership to get around legal limits, or if Milken wanted to secretly accumulate a position without alerting the market, they'd arrange for one to buy stock from the other, with a guarantee against losses. The stock was just parked in the other's account, while the true owner remained hidden. John Mulheron, Boesky's friend, was often used for these arrangements, sometimes without even knowing it. They manipulated stock prices. In one brazen scheme involving Fischbach Corporation, Milken wanted to help a client, Victor Posner, get around an agreement preventing him from buying more stock. So Milken simply instructed Boesky to buy a huge stake in Fischbach, break the agreement, and put the company in play. Boesky lost money on the deal, but Milken promised to make him whole through other rigged trades. When they needed to settle a balance of $5.3 million that Milken owed Boesky, they created a phony invoice for investment banking services that would later become a smoking gun for prosecutors. And they traded directly on inside information from the source. In one instance, Milken learned of an impending merger between Diamond Shamrock and Occidental Petroleum from a Drexel client involved in the deal. Milken immediately called Boesky, who was in a meeting with his staff. Boesky put Milken on speakerphone, and his entire staff listened in stunned silence as Milken gave explicit instructions to buy Diamond Shamrock and sell Occidental short, a clear bet on the merger. This secret partnership was far more sophisticated and profitable than anything Levine or Siegel could have imagined. Milken was the engine, privy to Drexel's entire deal flow. Boesky increasingly became little more than an order taker, his firm a secret vessel for Milken's illegal schemes. By 1986, these interlocking rings of corruption were running at full throttle. On the surface, it was the peak of the greed decade. Milken was hosting his annual junk bond conference, dubbed the, quote, Predators' Ball, a lavish affair in Beverly Hills where corporate raiders, CEOs, and financiers celebrated the power of junk bonds. Diana Ross and Frank Sinatra performed. It felt like nothing could ever stop them. They were, in their own minds, untouchable. But they'd made one fatal mistake. They'd underestimated the power of a single, determined investigator and the randomness of fate. The thread that unraveled everything didn't start on Wall Street but in Caracas, Venezuela. In May 1985, Merrill Lynch's compliance department received a poorly written anonymous letter claiming that two of their Caracas brokers were trading on inside information. An internal investigation began, led by compliance officer Richard Drew. He discovered the two brokers were indeed making suspicious trades, but more importantly, their trades almost perfectly mirrored those of another broker who'd recently left Merrill for Smith Barney, a guy named Brian Campbell. And Campbell's biggest client was the Bahamas branch of Bank Liu. Suddenly, investigators had their link. They suspected the real source was a Bank Liu client. Merrill Lynch turned its findings over to the SEC. The SEC investigation, led by a young, determined enforcement chief named Gary Lynch, began slowly and painstakingly following the trail. They subpoenaed Brian Campbell, who lied under oath, claiming his trades were based on his own research. The investigators knew they needed to crack Bank Liu itself, a formidable challenge given Swiss and Bahamian banking secrecy laws. The pressure mounted on Bank Liu's bankers, Bernhard Meyer and Bruno Pletcher. They were handling the secret account for Mr. Diamond, who was, of course, Dennis Levine. Levine had coached them to lie, to claim that Meyer was the brilliant stock picker behind the trades. He even had them shred incriminating documents, like his passport photocopy. But the SEC was relentless. They served a subpoena on Meyer while he was visiting New York, trapping him in the country. Fearing prosecution for obstruction of justice, the bank finally decided to cooperate. Its lawyer, Harvey Pitt, went to Gary Lynch and cut a deal. The bank would reveal its client's identity in exchange for immunity. On Friday, May 9, 1986, Pitt placed the call to Lynch. Moby Dick, he said, using their code name for the unknown trader, is Dennis B. Levine. The dominoes started falling. 3 days later, Levine was arrested. He spent a night in jail with two accused drug dealers, a shock that shattered his arrogant confidence. Faced with overwhelming evidence and his $12 million in illegal profits frozen, Levine knew he had only one choice. He agreed to cooperate. He sat down with prosecutors from the U.S. Attorney's Office in Manhattan, led by a gruff, brilliant prosecutor named Charles Carberry, and confessed everything. He gave them his entire ring: Wilkes, Reich, Sokolow, and Sokolow's source at Goldman Sachs, David Brown. One by one, they were confronted and pleaded guilty. But Levine had a much bigger name to offer. He told prosecutors about his secret arrangement with Ivan Boesky. Now the government had its sights on a truly big fish. In the summer of 1986, they served subpoenas on Boesky. Like Levine, Boesky knew he was trapped. But he also knew he had something far more valuable to trade. He knew about Michael Milken. Boesky's lawyers approached the government and offered a deal of historic proportions. Boesky would plead guilty to a felony, pay a record-breaking $100 million penalty, and, most importantly, work as an undercover agent for the government. He'd wear a wire, he'd tape his conversations, he'd become the government's window into the secret criminal world of Wall Street. The government agreed. The trap was set. For weeks, Boesky secretly recorded his phone calls with co-conspirators. He taped a face-to-face meeting with Michael Milken at the Beverly Hills Hotel, where they discussed their illegal arrangements and how to cover up that phony $5.3 million invoice. On Friday, November 14, 1986, the bombshell dropped. The SEC announced that Ivan Boesky, the king of the arbitrageurs, was a crook cooperating with the government. A tidal wave of subpoenas crashed over Wall Street, hitting Drexel, Michael Milken, Martin Siegel, Robert Freeman, and dozens of others. The chase had entered its final, most dramatic phase. Siegel was the first to crumble. Already racked with guilt and fear, he received a blackmail threat from a stranger who claimed to know about his relationship with the Russian. The threat pushed him over the edge. He confessed to his wife and hired a criminal lawyer. He agreed to plead guilty to 2 felonies and cooperate fully, becoming the second star witness after Boesky. Siegel's information led to arrests of Robert Freeman at Goldman Sachs and his own former underlings at Kidder, Peabody, Richard Wigton, and Timothy Tabor. The arrests, complete with handcuffs on the trading floor, sent shockwaves through the Wall Street establishment. But the main target remained Michael Milken. And Milken, along with Drexel, decided to fight. They assembled the most expensive and powerful legal and public relations team ever assembled for a criminal defendant. They hired legendary lawyer Edward Bennett Williams and star litigator Arthur Lyman. They hired Linda Robinson, a powerhouse PR strategist, who launched a massive campaign to reshape Milken's image from greedy financier to national treasure being persecuted by overzealous prosecutors. For 2 years they waged brutal war against the government, fighting in courts and in the press. They attacked Boesky's credibility, portrayed prosecutors as bullies, and wrapped Milken in the flag of American capitalism. They kept potential witnesses in line through a combination of loyalty, money, and intimidation. For a while, it seemed Milken's power and wealth might actually defeat the U.S. government. But the government's case was steadily building. They secured cooperation from key Boesky employees, like his accountant, Setrag Moradian, who'd kept records of the secret Milken arrangements. The biggest cracks in Milken's wall came from inside his own Beverly Hills office. First, James Dahl, Milken's top salesman, felt betrayed and agreed to cooperate in exchange for immunity. Then another traitor, Taryn Pizer, did the same, handing prosecutors incriminating documents he'd secretly kept. The pressure on Drexel became unbearable. Faced with a devastating racketeering indictment that would have effectively killed the firm overnight, the board finally turned on its greatest star. In December 1988, Drexel Burnham Lambert agreed to plead guilty to 6 felonies and pay $650 million in fines. The firm that Milken built had abandoned him to save itself. But it was too late. Stripped of Milken, its credibility destroyed, and weighed down by a collapsing junk bond market, Drexel spiraled into bankruptcy just over a year later, in February 1990. The most powerful firm of the 1980s was dead. Now Milken stood alone. His legal team kept fighting, but the tide had turned. On April 24, 1990, just as prosecutors were preparing an even more damaging indictment, Michael Milken surrendered. He walked into a federal courtroom in Manhattan and pleaded guilty to 6 felonies, admitting to conspiring with Boesky, defrauding investors, and evading taxes. In November 1990, he was sentenced to 10 years in prison. The king of the den of thieves had been dethroned. The decade of greed was finally, officially over. So what should we make of this incredible story? It's tempting to look at these men, Milken, Boesky, Siegel, Levine, and just see greed. And sure, greed was definitely there. The hunger for more money, more status, a bigger house, a faster car. But if we stop there, I think we miss the deeper, more important lesson of Den of Thieves. At its core, this story isn't really about greed. It's about insecurity. It's about ego. And it's about the slow, almost invisible erosion of character that happens when you start making small compromises. Think about Martin Siegel. He was already a multimillionaire. He didn't need Boesky's cash. What he craved was the feeling of being an insider, of having an edge, of being back at the center of the game. He was afraid of being left behind. Think about Dennis Levine. His entire career was fueled by desperate need to prove himself, to overcome those early rejections. He wanted the world to see that the kid from Queens could beat the Ivy Leaguers at their own game. And Michael Milken, the most powerful of them all. He truly believed he was a visionary genius, changing the world for the better. He saw securities laws not as moral guardrails, but as annoying obstacles to his grand vision. He believed he was above them. This is the real danger this book illuminates so powerfully. It's the story of what happens when ambition becomes untethered from a moral compass. Each of these men started by rationalizing a small step over the line. Everyone's doing it, they told themselves. It's victimless. My advice is valuable. I deserve to be paid for it. But one small step led to another, and soon they were so deep in the darkness they couldn't find their way back. They became trapped in a web of their own making, a web of secrets and lies that required more secrets and more lies to maintain. For someone just starting out, someone with great ambition and a desire to make a mark on the world, this is perhaps the most important lesson of all. Success will present you with temptations. It'll offer you shortcuts. It'll whisper in your ear that the rules are for other people. And in those moments, the strength of your character will be tested. The story of Den of Thieves is a powerful reminder that true success, the kind that lasts, isn't built on secret advantages or clever loopholes, but on a foundation of integrity. It's about knowing where your lines are before they're tested. It's a reminder that your reputation, once shattered, is nearly impossible to fully repair. These men reached the absolute pinnacle of wealth and power, but they lost the one thing money can never buy: peace of mind. They lived in constant fear of a phone call, of a knock on the door, of a single anonymous letter that could bring their entire world crashing down. And in the end, it did. That was a summary of Den of Thieves by James B. Stewart. We've touched on the main narrative and the journeys of the key players, but I have to be honest, a summary can only ever be a map of the territory. The real adventure happens when you walk the path yourself. The true power of this book is in the rich detail, the fly-on-the-wall conversations, and the slow, suspenseful unraveling of the conspiracy that Stewart so brilliantly reports. This summary is here to help you decide if this story is one you want to explore more deeply. If anything we've discussed today has sparked your curiosity or made you think, I encourage you to pick up a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning financial history. It's an unforgettable thriller and a profound lesson in human nature that'll stay with you long after you've turned the final page. You can find a link to the book in the description below. Also, if you found this journey valuable, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It lets me know these stories matter, and it ensures you won't miss our next exploration into another transformative book from the billionaire's bookshelf. Let's keep learning and growing together.